Driving alone in the countryside, I marveled at the picturesque landscape that stretched out before me. Rolling hills, lush green fields, and quaint farmhouses passed by my car's windows. It was the perfect escape from the chaos of city life, or so I thought. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape. I had decided to take a spontaneous road trip, leaving behind the stresses of work and the relentless noise of the city. As the miles rolled on, I stumbled upon a small, weathered sign by the side of the road, almost hidden in the tall grass. Harmony Motel 10 miles ahead, it read in faded letters. I hadn't planned on staying anywhere, but the idea of a cozy countryside motel sounded inviting. With no particular destination in mind, I decided to follow the sign and see what the Harmony Motel had to offer. The road twisted and turned through dense woods, and the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the asphalt. It felt like I was venturing into the heart of the wilderness, far from civilization. The sense of isolation was both unsettling and strangely exhilarating. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the motel came into view. It was a quaint, two-story building with a faded neon sign that read Harmony Motel in cursive letters. The place had an old-world charm to it, but as I parked my car and stepped out, I couldn't help but notice how eerily silent it was. A gust of wind rustled through the overgrown bushes, making them whisper secrets to the empty parking lot. There was no sign of life, no other cars, and no lights in the windows. The motel seemed frozen in time, as if it had been abandoned for years. Despite my initial reservations, exhaustion won over curiosity. I decided to check in, hoping that the interior would be more welcoming than the exterior. The wooden door creaked open, and a small brass bell jingled above it as I entered the dimly lit lobby. The sight that greeted me sent a shiver down my spine. The lobby was furnished with antique furniture covered in dust cloths, and the wallpaper had started to peel. A flickering fluorescent light overhead cast eerie shadows that danced across the cracked linoleum floor. The motel's reception desk was deserted, but a small brass bell sat prominently on its counter. I hesitated for a moment, then reached out and rang it. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, bouncing off the walls and making me acutely aware of my solitude. After what felt like an eternity, an elderly woman appeared from a door behind the counter. She had a gaunt face, with deep lines etched into her skin, and her eyes bore a weariness that seemed to have settled in her soul. "Can I help you?" she asked in a raspy voice, her gaze fixed on me. "Yes," I replied, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. "I'd like to book a room for the night." The woman nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting me. She handed me a tarnished brass key and pointed towards the staircase that led to the second floor. "Room 203, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As I climbed the creaky stairs to my room, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The motel's eerie silence and the strange demeanor of the woman at the front desk made me wonder if I had made a mistake by checking in. But exhaustion got the better of me, and I entered room 203, hoping for a quiet night's sleep. Little did I know that the night ahead would be anything but peaceful, and the Harmony Motel held secrets that would test the limits of my courage and sanity. I entered room 203, and a musty, stale odor hit me immediately. The room was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn tightly over the windows, blocking out even the last traces of daylight. The air felt heavy and suffocating, and I quickly moved to open a window to let in some fresh air. As I looked out into the fading twilight, I noticed that the woods surrounding the motel seemed to press in on the building, their towering trees casting long, ominous shadows that stretched towards my room. It was as if nature itself was encroaching upon the motel, reclaiming it from the world of the living. I decided to unpack my things and freshen up before venturing out to find something to eat. The room was sparsely furnished, with an old, creaky bed, a worn-out armchair, and a small, dusty television that looked like it had seen better days. The wallpaper was peeling, revealing layers of faded patterns, and the carpet felt damp and cold beneath my feet. After a quick shower, I decided to turn on the television to see if there was anything to distract me from the growing sense of unease. As I flipped through the channels, the screen displayed nothing but static, a crackling sea of black and white. Just as I was about to turn it off, a faint, ghostly image began to form on the screen. It was a woman with long, dark hair, her face twisted in anguish. Her eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, locking onto mine with a haunting intensity. I gasped and stumbled backward, my heart racing. The image on the television continued to flicker and distort, and the woman's cries grew louder and more desperate. It was as if she were trying to communicate something, but the words were lost in a cacophony of static. I turned off the television, my hands trembling. The room had grown colder, and I could feel a presence in the air, something that seemed to linger just beyond the edge of my perception. It was as if the very walls of the motel were closing in on me. I tried to convince myself that what I had seen on the television was a trick of the light or a malfunctioning old set, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with this place. With a growing sense of unease, I decided to leave the room and explore the motel in the hope of finding answers. As I ventured down the narrow corridor, the flickering fluorescent lights overhead cast eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of the wind howling through the trees. I reached the end of the corridor and found myself in a small lounge area. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets, cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. An old television sat in the corner, its screen dark and lifeless. As I turned to leave the lounge, I heard a faint, mournful whisper, so soft that it was almost drowned out by the howling wind outside. It was a name, repeated over and over again, Sarah. Sarah. I froze in place, my heart pounding in my chest. The name echoed in my ears, and I couldn't tell if it was a plea for help or a warning. The room seemed to close in on me, the shadows growing darker and more menacing. I had to get out of there. I turned and ran down the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the empty motel. The storm outside had reached its peak, with thunder rattling the windows and rain pelting the roof like 1,000 tiny footsteps. Back in my room, I locked the door and barricaded it with the furniture. I could still hear the whispering voice, faint but persistent, Sarah. Sarah. It seemed to come from all around me, as if the very walls themselves were speaking. I huddled in the corner of the room, my heart pounding, as I realized that I was not alone in that motel. Something or someone was there with me, something that wanted to be heard, something that was determined to make its presence known. As I sat there, trembling in the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder what had brought me to this forsaken place and what secrets the Harmony Motel held. But one thing was clear, I was trapped in a nightmare, and there was no escape. The minutes felt like hours as I sat huddled in that dimly lit room, the ghostly whispers of Sarah echoing in the air around me. The oppressive atmosphere in the motel seemed to close in, and a sense of dread settled deep in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent was lurking in the shadows. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine as I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside my door. Slow, deliberate footsteps, each one echoing like a death knell in the silence of the night. I strained my ears, trying to make out if it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then came the soft, mournful whisper once more, Sarah. My breath caught in my throat as the voice drew nearer, and the footsteps approached my door. Panic surged through me, and I grabbed my phone to call for help, only to find that there was no signal. I was completely cut off from the outside world. The doorknob began to turn slowly, as if pushed by an unseen force. I held my breath, clutching the phone tightly in my hand, ready to defend myself against whatever was on the other side. The door creaked open, and I could see nothing but darkness in the corridor beyond. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response, just the soft whisper of my name, Sarah. This time, it seemed to come from inside the room, as if the very walls were speaking to me. I flicked on the flashlight on my phone, casting a feeble beam of light into the corridor. There was no one there, but the chill in the air grew colder, and I felt a presence in the room with me, something unseen but undeniably real. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, and then I saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the foot of the bed. It was a woman, her long hair hanging in disarray, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. She was dressed in a tattered gown, her spectral form almost translucent. "Sarah?" I whispered, a mixture of fear and sympathy welling up inside me. The figure nodded, and though she didn't speak, her presence conveyed a desperate plea for help. It was as if her spirit was trapped in this forsaken place, unable to move on, and she had chosen me as her conduit. I knew I had to do something to unravel the mystery of Sarah's restless spirit and bring her the peace she so desperately sought. With trembling hands, I began to ask questions, piecing together the fragments of her story. Through a series of faint nods and gestures, Sarah revealed the tragic tale of her life and death. She had been a young woman in love, married to a man who had brought her to the Harmony Motel for a romantic getaway. But what was meant to be a night of love had turned into a night of terror, as her husband had turned violent, ending her life in a fit of rage. Sarah's spirit had been trapped in the motel ever since, her unfinished business keeping her tethered to this world. She wanted justice for the terrible injustice done to her, and she had chosen me to be her advocate. Determined to help Sarah find the closure she needed, I vowed to uncover the truth behind her murder and bring her husband to justice, even if it meant risking my own safety. Together, we embarked on a journey to unravel the dark secrets of the Harmony Motel, unearthing a web of deceit and betrayal that had been hidden for decades. As the night wore on, the motel seemed to come alive with supernatural activity. Objects moved on their own, strange apparitions appeared, and eerie whispers filled the air. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been torn, and the motel had become a portal to a world beyond. But Sarah and I pressed on, determined to find the answers we sought. It was a harrowing journey into the unknown, filled with terror and uncertainty. Yet, with each revelation, we came closer to uncovering the truth and setting Sarah's spirit free. The horrors of that night at the Harmony Motel would stay with me forever, but so would the memory of the bond one had formed with Sarah, a bond that transcended the boundaries between the living and the dead. Together, we faced the darkness that lurked within the motel's walls, and in doing so, we brought light to a soul trapped in eternal torment. As the night wore on, Sarah's presence became more pronounced, guiding me through the tangled web of secrets and deceit that had plagued the Harmony Motel for decades. We uncovered evidence of her husband's crimes, hidden away in forgotten corners of the motel. With newfound determination, I contacted the authorities and shared the shocking revelations we had unearthed. They arrived at the motel, apprehended Sarah's husband, and uncovered the truth that had been buried for so long. Justice was served, and Sarah's spirit seemed to glow with a sense of peace and resolution. The motel, once shrouded in darkness and despair, began to transform. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the air felt lighter. Sarah's presence gradually faded, and it was as if the very walls themselves sighed in relief. With her spirit finally at rest, I knew it was time for me to leave the Harmony Motel. The authorities had cleared the scene, and the once forbidding place now appeared almost welcoming in the morning light. As I walked away from the motel, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey I had undertaken. It had been a nightmarish experience, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it had also been a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of redemption. The countryside stretched out before me once more, bathed in the soft light of dawn. I got into my car and drove away from the Harmony Motel, leaving behind the horrors of that night. The memories would stay with me forever, a haunting reminder of the supernatural forces that can lurk in the most unexpected places. But I was free, and so was Sarah. As I looked back one last time at the fading silhouette of the motel in my rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel a sense of closure and relief. The Harmony Motel, once a place of nightmares, was now a place of rest, and I knew that I had played a part in bringing harmony to a troubled soul and a forsaken place.